Welcome back to IAS Net Study. This is the ethics series and this is the 23rd video in this ethics series. We have finished 4 units, ethics and human interface, then we talked about attitude, then we talked about aptitude, and we have finished emotional intelligence also. Now we are taking up the 5th unit. 5th unit is comparatively bigger when you compare it to other chapters in your syllabus. So this is moral philosophy. Here we are going to talk about moral philosophy. We are going to talk about philosophers also. There is a distinction you need to understand. Predominant distinction is that ancient philosophers, medieval philosophers, and modern philosophers. Usually ancient philosophers, they mainly focus on virtues. Most of these ancient philosophers, their focus on virtues, values. And these virtues, values are seen from a social perspective, from a society perspective. And again, if you look at the medieval philosophy, medieval philosophers and the philosophy, they mainly focus on, again here also, moral values. Along with moral values, there is a concept, faith. It is religion based. The element of religion we can see in the medieval philosophers, both in western side as well as the eastern side also. And in the modern philosophy, especially after Renaissance, the modern philosophy, usually if you look at the medieval and ancient, it is usually these moral values and these philosophical ideas, they are widely seen from a social perspective, from a society perspective. But in the modern philosophy, it becomes internal. So here philosophies are seen and questioned from an individual perspective. Here the rights, liberty, freedom, these aspects are questioned here, and these aspects are analyzed here in the modern philosophies. So this is a distinction. This is a one distinction, and another distinction is the Western philosophy and the Oriental philosophy. These kind of distinction are also there. So eventually what I'll do is, first I'll give the evolution. We are going to talk about evolution, how exactly these philosophies evolved, and how exactly one philosophy has inspired another philosophy, one philosopher has inspired another philosopher. And then in the second round of discussion, we are going to have a word view. I am going to give a brief understanding regarding development of these moral philosophies. And finally, in the final, we are going to have a detailed analysis of each philosopher. Usually what happens, philosophy, it means that there is a philosopher or an accepted philosophy, there is a philosophy. And after 100 years, these things are questioned, and the new philosophy or new thought process enter into the society, and new philosopher gave his thought process or his idea. So the new philosophy B, comes into the picture. Here this philosophy, it is going to question the philosophy A. Already there is a society is following certain philosophical uh, values. Now B is going to question it. If people accept B, then A is going to be rejected. B, society is going to adapt the B. So after few years, after 100 years, again new philosopher comes. He is going to question B and he is going to come up with a new philosophy. If society accepts, that becomes a new norm of the society. So this is how philosophy evolves over the year. So there is a clear influence will be there, even though there is an outright rejection or gradual rejection, whatever it is, whether it is outright or whether it is a gradual adoption of new things, but there is a chain or a link factor is there from one philosophy to another philosophy. See, the society is accepting new philosophy, new value system, because it is not happy with what uh, existing norm is there. So there is a questioning, there is an analysis. So it usually give rise to new philosophy. Eventually after few years, after 100 years, maybe new philosophy comes into the picture. So again, these kind of link is there. So if you could able to create that link, it would be easier for you to understand this philosophy. And another thing is, it's impossible to cover almost all the philosophers around the world. It is extremely impossible, and time constraints are also there. So what I'm going to do is, the most important, or especially the previous, if you go through the previous year's question paper, there are few topics like utilitarianism, Kantian philosophy. These are quite famous. See, these kind of repeated questions, repeated topics, or the question based on these aspects, we are going to cover these. We are going to focus mainly on these things. Along with that, the other philosophies or philosophers which are important from understanding perspective, that also I am going to cover. On the whole, maximum, as much as possible, I am going to cover. But still if you have that interest, you can dig deeper, you can understand a bit more. So what I suggest you is, at least these philosophers, you should be aware of what they are trying to say, what they are trying to convey, and what are their stand with respect to social norms, that you need to understand. And one thing, if you understand this, you can use these terminologies, utilitarianism, empiricism, all these things in your case studies also, and even it comes in handy with respect to your essays also. The philosophical based essays, you need to have a very strong content to substantiate whatever you're saying. You have to quote these philosophers, it gives an added advantage for you, so you can use that in your essays also. So there is an added advantage, and this is extremely important. This chapter is extremely important, even though direct questions may be one or two only, but the base concepts of these philosophy, ultimately moral philosophy, somewhere you can equate it to the ethics and the human interface, the basic ethics, that it is derived from these philosophy only. These philosophers have questioned it, and these philosophers have given these moral ideas. So understanding moral philosophy, this unit is extremely important to understand the entire ethical chapter. Other things, it's quite easy. It takes time, but once you understand these moral philosophies, it is going to stay in your head, and you don't need to revise it again and again if you have a clear understanding of what these philosophers are trying to say. Fine. So let's get into the discussion of moral philosophy, the fifth unit. So let's dissect, let's understand this terminology first, and then we'll get into the furthermore discussion. So as I told you, initially we are going to talk about evolution, then I am going to talk about bird view, and finally the detailed analysis. Right. Now, moral philosophy. So there are two terminologies here. So philosophy, what exactly philosophy is? Philosophy, it is going to question your existence. So philosophy, I am looking for ultimate reality. Wait a minute. Yes, I am looking for a, if I am a philosopher, or philosophy, usually it looks for ultimate reality. What is right, what is wrong, why am I existing, who am I, and what is truth, all these things, what makes life meaningful. See, this philosophy is nothing but you are questioning everything. By questioning everything, you are going to understand the life. So you are searching ultimate reality, so that is philosophy. Now there is another terminology, that is morals, it's nothing but values. You know that morals are values. These values, it can be internal or it can be external. It may be individual values or social values. So philosophy, I am going to question here, moral philosophy is that it is going to question the accepted social norms. It is going to question the social values or individual values. It is going to question theories behind these moral philosophy. It is going to dissect what is good, what is bad. So moral philosophy, it is going to it helps you to understand fundamental questions about the life. And maybe some philosophers, they are going to question it through the rationality, some they are going to through the logical reasoning, some maybe you may use the faith as a factor of understanding. So it changes from person to person, and time period to time period, and philosopher to philosopher. So ultimately, moral philosophy, it is an area of philosophy that concerned with theories of ethics, that with how we ought to live our lives. Usually moral philosophies, it tell you what is right and what is wrong. By following this, you are going to make a decision in your life. So it is going to give theories, and it will tell you to follow these theories in order to be ethical in life. So this is what moral philosophy talks about. And one thing, it tells you what to do and what to not, and what is right, what is wrong. Along with that, if there are established norms, it is also going to give the justification. If it is rejecting the moral philosophy, then also it is going to give the justification. So moral philosophers want to discover how these rules are justified. The Socrates, Plato, this is what they question, the existing norm actually. Why are you doing this? So you have to question them. You don't accept whatever the status quo, question them. There should be a factor of rationality. Based on that, you take a decision. So how these rules are justified, and at the logical consequences of moral ethics and beliefs. Sorry, this is moral philosophy. Now now the thing is, if you look at around the world, every civilization, ancient, modern, medieval, every civilization, every part of the world, every time period, there was a moral philosophy. All the culture, whether it is prehistoric, whether it is medieval, modern, whether it is Eastern, Western, whether it is a religious society or a secular society, they have developed their school of philosophy. See, it's different from one country to another country, one civilization to another civilization, even different time periods also. Ancient moral philosophies are different, medievals are different, modern philosophies are different. But what commonality is, for every time period, for every civilization, there are moral philosophies. It means that there are accepted social standards, there are theories that guides you what to do and what not to do. So for every culture, prehistoric, ancient, medieval, every time period, these kind of philosophies are there. And how exactly these philosophies came into the existence? One thing, there might be inheritance of tradition. My ancestors were doing it and I'm following the same thing. I'm not questioning it, I'm just following the same thing. Again, my ancestors, they have made this moral philosophy, and now I'm just following it. One thing, there is an inheritance of tradition. From that way, I am following these values, these norms, because my ancestors were doing. This is one way. And the second one is, I'm not happy with what my ancestors were doing. Now I am going to develop my own moral philosophy. So there is a independent human reflection. Independent human reflection, usually it means that rationalism, based on logical reasoning. You're not happy with your ancestors are doing, you're going to question it. Based on that question, you get answers. Based on that, you're going to develop new moral philosophy. So this is how there are two ways. One thing, you're following what your ancestors are doing, inheritance of a tradition, or else if you're not happy with that, independently you develop some of the philosophies, right? So these are the two ways. And predominantly there are three ways these philosophies have evolved. The first is through rationalism. The same thing, there are accepted norms in the society. I am not happy about it, I am going to question everything. So since I'm questioning everything, I'm getting answers. Based on my answers, based on my questioning, I am going to accept new norms, I am going to develop new norms. So some traditions, it rely on rationalism. So whatever practiced in India 500 years ago as a social norm, it is not practiced at this point of time. Whatever it is practiced 500 years ago in Western countries, there is a drastic change at this point of time, because there is a factor of rationalism. They questioned it, they find it this is wrong, so they have evolved it. So one way of developing moral philosophy is rationalism, where knowledge is derived through pure reason and logical thinking. Through logical thinking, moral philosophy has evolved in the society. This is one way. And the second way is empiricism. What is empiricism? Rationalism is through the logical reasoning. Empiricism is that new philosophies, new ideas emerge from the observation. So I have experienced something, through my experience I have developed some moral philosophy. So it may be through observation, I have seen what is happening, so there is a wrong, this is wrong, I have observed that. Because of my observation, I came to a conclusion and I came up with a new moral values. So it may be through observation, it may be my personal experience, or it may be through the sensory evidence. So first is rationalism. Through rationalism, moral philosophy has developed in a society. And second way of development is empiricism. Empiricism is nothing but experience or observation. And the third way is that faith or intuition. Faith, intuition, usually the religious thing or spiritual based philosophies, usually we take it from ancestors or previous generations. So the third set of approaches, they draw these philosophies on faith, intuition, hope, or inherited wisdom. So producing system rooted in spirituality or the belief in a higher power. So there is a supernatural entity, and they believe that, especially these moral philosophies believe that this supernatural entity, it has a power to coordinate, it has a power to control. As an example, karma, concept of karma. Here we believe that if I do positive things, good things are going to happen to me. If I do something negative, I am going to be punished. And who is going to do it? There is an entity, supernatural entity, that is going to take care of everything. So this is one philosophy, and this philosophy guides me to do something good. This philosophy restricts my intention to do something harm or something negative in the society or another person. So these are the three ways moral philosophy has developed throughout the year, throughout this journey. Now, so on the whole, together these diverse pathways, the three pathways we discussed, show that philosophy is a universal human endeavor. So every time period, prehistoric, ancient, medieval, modern, it was there. And every civilization, whether it is Eastern countries, Indian subcontinent, Greek, Oriental, there was moral philosophy in the society. It was practiced, and it was up. The values are upheld by the people at that period of time. So despite different methods and worldviews, every culture aims to answer fundamental questions about life, about truth, about purpose, and moral conduct. So this is with respect to moral philosophy. right? We understood moral philosophy, and we understood how exactly these philosophies have evolved or emerged over the years. Now, as I told you, let's talk about evolution first. Then I'm going to take the bird view of development of moral philosophy. Now, let's talk about evolution. Evolution, the origin of moral philosophy. Usually, if you look at the most standard books, all the origins start from Greek philosophy, the seven sages. This is where it starts. But before that, also Indian philosophy, Upanishad, they were there. But since it has been given in the textbook, I am going to start it evolution. I'm going to start it from Greek foundation. But in the further discussions, further in the bird view and the detailed analysis, we are going to take up the Indian philosophies also. But at this point of time, as an evolution, since it has been an accepted norm theoretically, so we are going to start from Greek foundation. So Greek seven sages. This is where the initial discourse started. This is what the discussion or the questioning of social norms it started. It started with seven sages initially, and later on the Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they have given their contribution. Usually the Greek foundations, they're mainly for their philosophies are mainly focused on virtues. Virtues are nothing but moral values. Here your decision, your conduct should be based on virtues. There are certain virtues. Wisdom is a virtue, knowledge is a virtue, or temperance is a virtue. See, courage is a virtue. See, if your actions are based on these virtues, then you are moving in a path of morality. So your conduct is moral. If you're not following, if your decisions are not based on these virtues, your conduct is immoral. Your whatever you're doing, it is unethical. So this is how you make a distinction. So Greek, if you look at the evolution, initially Greek predominantly the first discourse or the discussions on moral philosophy starts with seven sages. Later on it has been added, or some more material is added by an extended philosopher, that is Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And all these, if you look at the seven sages as well as the key thinkers of Greek philosopher, they are mainly predominantly they focus on virtues, that your conduct should be based on these positive virtues, and reason. They are going to question the status quo, logical reasoning, rationality. That also they are going to pose here, and also they are going to tell you the ethical purpose of human life, ethical conduct of human life. So this is with respect to Greek. So evolution started with Greek. So this is what Greek philosophy mainly focus on: virtue, reason, and the ethical conduct. Now, ancient Oriental contribution. Oriental, usually Eastern civilization. If you look at the Eastern civilizations, predominantly one famous philosophers we often talk about is Confucius. Confucius, he developed moral system, and his predominant values are harmony in a society, within family and the outside family, and the duty of every individual. Maybe you can consider it as a one family, as an entity. It has certain duties, and the righteous conduct. So it tells you what to do and what not, what are your duties and what you have to do. And also there should be a harmony, and if you are, whatever your actions, if it is supporting this factor of harmony, then your conduct is moral, then your conduct is ethical. So this is how you decide whether my actions are positive or negative. And strong emphasis, usually since harmony is the primary factor here, so strong emphasis is given on social order and ethical relationship in a group or in a community. So this is with respect to Oriental contribution. So Oriental, they also talked about moral philosophy, and they focused on these aspects: harmony, duty, and the social order. Next, let's come to the medieval moral philosophies. Medieval moral philosophies, I told you that medieval moral philosophies predominantly they are religious in nature. If you look at the Western philosophers like Saint Thomas Aquinas or Saint Augustine, the Christian theology is very much visible there. The concept of faith is there, even though the whatever Aristotle, Socrates, they talked about virtues. And in the medieval philosophies, along with these virtues, the faith, the hope, these kind of theological based values are added into it. And even if you look at the Indian medieval period also, the concept of bhaktism, Sufism, that also emerged at that point of time. Even they also talked about the spirituality and the theology, along with that equality. Some of the virtues like equality, justice, all these things are also entered into the picture. So medieval period, what you have to remember, what is the main focus? Main focus is theology. Theology is religion, spirituality. Along with that, virtues. So theology plus virtues. And important philosophers you need to remember: Thomas Aquinas, Saint Thomas Aquinas, and Saint Augustine. These are quite famous ones. And then comes Renaissance. Renaissance, it is a period where industrial revolution was happening. At that period of time, the thinking process, the thought process has changed actually. Initially, in the ancient, if you look at the Greek philosophy, we are focusing on virtues only, and it is seen from a social perspective. As a community, we are setting some standards. Now, in the medieval, it is more of spiritual, it is more of religion. Now, in the Renaissance, the industrial revolution at that period of time, the new set of philosophies emerged, and this new set of philosophies mainly focusing on human dignity, human autonomy, and the rational inquiry. Rationality, it was there before also. Now, along with rationality, I have the freedom, I have the power to question you also. The concept of rational inquiry happened. It means that the empowerment of individual being, that concept is seen here in the Renaissance, especially the moral philosophies at this time period, and even after this period also, the strong influence of individual inquiry, human dignity, it can be seen in further more philosophies also. So the change in the philosophy you can see. So one change happened during medieval, and the next change is happening during Renaissance period, right? And the next evolution after this, after Renaissance, the moral philosophies have taken a new turn, and in this new turn, there are the actions are decided good or bad based on ends and based on means. Certain philosophies supported means, certain philosophies supported ends. It means that certain philosophies told that whatever action you do, the way you do things, the means to achieve something, that matters a lot. So if the means is positive, then your actions are considered moral. And some of the philosophers supported end-based philosophies. End-based philosophy is usually consequences. If the consequences of your actions are positive, then it is considered as moral, then it is considered as ethical. If the consequences are negative, whatever the step you follow, it is not going to be taken into the consideration. Ultimately, the consequences, so consequences positive, it is moral. If the consequences are negative, it is immoral. So here, the change in the way you analyze things, it started after Renaissance. So individualistic, and now after that, the ends and the means approaches, they evolved. And in that, one of the prominent philosophers is that Immanuel Kant and Kantian philosophy. Immanuel Kant, he has provided a rational foundation of morality, and he talked about universal moral values. There are some values like truth. Truth is truth, whether it is 500 years ago, whether it is now after 500 years, truth is truth. There is a universal acceptance factor to it. So he emphasized the idea of universal moral laws, and he emphasized the human autonomy, and he emphasized the duty. We are going to have a detailed discussion on Kantian philosophy, but at this point of time, after Renaissance, the philosophies have taken different versions. Different philosophers have taken a stand. Some supported end-based philosophies, some taken a means-based philosophies. So here, Kantian supported means-based philosophies. It means that the way you do things, based on that, you are going to make a distinction whether this act is moral or immoral. Then after that, again, after Renaissance, I told you that individual dignity, freedom, liberty, equality, these things, they came into the limelight. So at the time of this Kantian moral philosophy, it is means based. The end based also emerged. End based, it includes utilitarianism. Ultimately, if the end goal is positive, if the outcome is positive, it is considered as positive. And in this utilitarianism, there is quantitative utilitarianism, and there is a qualitative utilitarianism. So we are going to have a detailed discussion on all these things, but understand that means Kantian philosophy and utilitarianism, end based philosophy. And then along with that, I told you that individual dignity, these concepts have also emerged. So the thinkers like John Locke, Adam Smith, and the John Stuart Mill, they strengthen this idea of liberty, rights, individual freedom. So one side, there is means based, end based, that is discussion is going on, and another side, along with that, whether it is means or end based, what you have to focus, one is means, another one, this is fine, this is going in a, the discourse, the debates, it's going on. But at the same time, while we were discussing Kantian philosophy or the utilitarianism, the concept of liberty, equality, fraternity, these also emerged simultaneously. Then See, these are all one set of evolution of moral philosophies. They were questioning the existing norm, but still they were not quite radical. It means that they wanted the transformation, they wanted that new norm. It is fine, but a radical critique, it was not very much seen. Whether when you start from a Socrates to till now, whether it is John Stuart Mill, the radical questioning or radical critique was not very much seen. They were rejected, accepted norms were questioned, they were experimented, all these things were there. But now the different approach is seen, the radical moral critique. Here Karl Marx, he also talked about certain values, he talked about equality, he talked about justice. But here the way he looked at things, it is something different. Usually if you look at the moral philosophies till now what moral philosophies are telling, these are internal in nature. Till now internal, it means that if you look at the ancient philosophy, it is talking about the virtues. See, if I have virtues in my actions, then I am going to be moral. If everybody is moral, then society is going to be moral. So this is how we see. And even in the medieval period also, if I have the values of faith, hope, all these things, the spiritual based virtues, there also it is individualistic. I am changing myself, everybody has these positive values, and entire society become positive, and the entire society become moral. So this is how. And even if you look at the means and end based, even after Renaissance also, it is from individualistic in nature. I want to have the justice, I want to have a dignity, all these things. But for that also I need to focus individually on myself. But if you look at the Karl Marx, especially the moral philosophies at this point of time, these radical critics, somewhere they are seeing that society is already unequal. There is an inequality, there is an injustice. How do you deal with that? You can deal with that, you can get that justice, you can get that equality, you can get that freedom through outrage. There is an exploitation already is there in a society. Now you have to correct this exploitation. Now you have to remove this inequality. How do you do it? Through the outrage. Especially whatever the exploitation is going on, you take things in your hand and you dethrow all these things. So it's a different way of making society moral, making social conduct moral. So this is radical moral critique. And if you look at the 20th century, even though the very specific moral philosophies, we have not seen very specifically talking about these moral philosophies, or the philosophers who are very specifically focusing on these discussions. But there are eminent personalities at this point of time, especially during 20th century. The new countries, they were under the colonial control, and they were trying to come out of it. In at this point of time, there were freedom fighters, they genuinely want the value of freedom. So in that value of freedom and independence, they have given certain philosophy. The way they have conducted themselves, it has given certain philosophies. These people have inspired millions of people around the world. Some of the examples in India, it's Mahatma Gandhi. If you look at the North American continent, it is Martin Luther King Jr. and then Nelson Mandela in South Africa and the southern part of African continent. So they have infused moral principles among the millions through the public struggle. Here they are very precisely, they're not talking about moral philosophy, or these moral philosophies or the practices, they are not the primary focus here. Primary focus was the freedom struggle. But even in that freedom struggle, these principles have emerged, these principles have reached people. So these principles have convinced people to act in a ethical way, act in a moral conduct. So this is how these eminent personalities, they've changed the discourse, they've changed the idea of philosophies actually, and they have emphasized the values of non-violence, the values of dignity, equality, justice, and they've given ethics a practical transformative role in the social change. So because when people imbibed all these things, the transformation, real transformation has happened at the ground level. Even though this transformation was given by Karl Marx also, but at the ground level, the practical changes, practical form of implementation is seen by these kind of moral leadership actually. So this is how the evolution, initially the Greek, and then we have a Oriental, the Confucius, and then we have a medieval moral philosophy, and eventually the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution time. Then comes means based, end based, and then along with that, there the question of individuality, question of liberty, equality, fraternity. These concepts have emerged, and it eventually the radical ideas are also entered into the moral philosophy, and then the ethical leadership, they've given a different dimension to these kind of moral philosophies in the world. So this is how the evolution of moral philosophies. And I think, yeah, this is it for this video. In the next video we are going to have a bird view. Bird view, it is also the same discussion but in an extended way. So in bird view, what I am going to do is I'm going to give the time period also. So in examination they are not going to ask you the time period, but if you understand, now you know the background. Now there we are going to put the time period. When you discuss with time period, you understand, it would be easier for you to connect evolution with the bird view, right? So I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good time.